AskReddit by Quark. What? A child that is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth. Story do you have? I met this kid while in junior high. Knew him his first year in high school. Back in 78/79. Remember the movie Carrie? He had that for a mother. He was super religious and had to pray multiple times a day. Carried a large Bible with his school books. Wore old-fashioned formal clothes, 1950s style haircut, and horned rim glasses. His mother punished him because she saw us talking when he got off the school bus. I guess I didn't pass the friend standard. He was so unsocialized and awkward. He was grateful to speak with anyone. And I didn't make fun of him. I guess it got to be too much. He didn't come back to school for the sophomore year. I later learned that while his mother was sleeping, he doused her with gasoline and set her and the bed on fire. She lived. And they just disappeared. I never heard of him again. How in the heck did she not die? There was that nuclear revenge post about a guy ostracized by the entire town. I think cause he was born out of wedlock, and after getting out of there became an inspector of some kind. Eventually he was given a list of factories that needed reviewing and one needed to close. The factory in his hometown was on the list. He goes there, inspects, they act all buddy-buddy thinking they're safe from closure. Boy, were 3 wrong. Every infraction, breach of safety, incorrect anything went into his report. The whole town basically was built around that factory, and when it shut down the town was desolate and dead within a few years. I know the exact one you're talking about. Popped into my head the moment I read the prompt. My bio parents lost custody of me due to addictions and neglect. I was adopted as a teenager by a woman who ended up being emotionally abusive, and I was supposed to be thankful because she pulled me out of the gutter and gave me opportunities in her mind. She's an extravagant spender and has blown through 2 large inheritances and a divorce settlement, years of alimony, and refused to get a job, even though she holds multiple master's degrees in a desirable field. Used the school loans to continue funding her lifestyle instead of working. She never saved for retirement despite having the means and opportunity to do so. Growing up, she told me I would grow up to be a drug-addicted dropout. I suspect that her bio children were her retirement plan because she told them to marry rich and push them into what she thought would be lucrative degrees. It was a classic scapegoat golden children scenario. She never fathomed that of all her kids, it would be me that broke 6 figures having landed a great career. Too bad for her that I cut her off 7 years ago and never looked back. She's now in her 60s having to start over financially. Her children don't make enough to support her and I won't contribute. Good on you. I'm really happy to hear you're doing well for yourself. I find that most people get pretty weird when I mention cutting one of my parents off for good, so I want you to know you've done well, if only to affirm what you've done. A kid who was relentlessly bullied at my school for years sued the district and got an upper 6-figure settlement. BRB. Filing a lawsuit. One of my friends in high school was a major overachiever. Stayed at school or work as much as possible, to the point where he may have spent an hour or less at home a day. He would always deflect questions about his home life, but confided in me that it was bad. Calling him the black sheep of the family would be a major understatement. His family had some money, not millionaire or billionaire but better off than most, and they told him from elementary school he would always be useless and never amount to anything. He is making bank after getting through college and finding a bomb job with a big pharmaceutical company. Meanwhile, his father's company, that has been in the family for a few generations, got picked apart by the government. Someone tipped them off that he was lying on taxes, hiring immigrants for next to nothing, hiding OSHA violations, and much more. As the dust was settling and the damage was really being seen, my buddy drove to his former family home and dropped off a file. The same file he gave an attorney that gave it to the government, and only said, "Who won't amount to anything?" Stone cold and absolutely ruthless. A kid I went to high school with pled guilty to attempted arson of his foster parents' home in a desperate attempt to escape the household. I knew his brother well. He was the drummer in the band I was in and we always practiced at his house, and it always worried me that they had way too many foster kids, almost like a potentially malicious intent was there. Nothing followed after he got out of juvie. He's married now and works really hard but is having a much better time of life. A pastor I lived next to constantly berated a kid in my class about everything from his hair length to him not fully embracing the word of the Lord. The kid routinely went into the pastor's backyard and would shit in his pool along with several of his friends all at once. They would also throw dead animals they found in there as well, ranging from a squirrel to a possum. Honestly, don't even blame the kid. That pastor was judgmental as fuck and no one liked him. My favorite post among the thread. This kid is my hero. Fucks that pastor and his judgmental bullshit. One kid at my old school was relentlessly bullied for being gay. One day she had enough, went up to her main bully during lunch one day and beat the ever-living shite out of him. For context, she was a very short and skinny girl while he was the typical jock. No one ever bothered her again after that and she was forever known as the nut masher. I actually ran into her a while back while visiting family in my hometown and we chatted for a bit. Turns out she is married and adopted a kid with a wife and all around looked a lot happier than she was in school. Long live nut masher. Personal story. I grew up on a farm. Nearest neighbor was a mile away. My village was my family, but I was the one that wasn't wanted. My father wanted me to be a mold of what he wanted. My mother was abused by him emotionally and mentally. My oldest brother watched as my father and other brother abused me physically and sexually. After I escaped, I told everyone what happened. I told the farming coop and local church community how horrible my father is and how my brother is a monster. I ruined them to the people they tried for years to impress. They ruined their daughter, I ruined them. I was lied to by HR, and it led to me not getting a promotion. I basically put them in a position where I couldn't be replaced and messed with the Excel codes I made for them that saved managers 6 hours a day. I didn't correct what I knew would get us high fees since it wasn't technically my job. Then I quit $700k in fines, nobody trained to do scheduling, department without anyone to run it, and additional work for the managers was the damage. I started getting calls to help them fix it. I'm sure you can imagine how well that went for them. Edit. To everyone complaining about my actions here, this was years ago. The Excel document automation wasn't something I was asked to do. I did it because having the manager free made everyone else's job easier. The document literally needed to be made once a month in order to keep functioning. On top of that, this isn't some mom and pop shop that got hit with this. This was a multi-million-dollar company. I was doing work above my pay grade, and outside of the scope of my job, I just stopped doing the extra. Don't fuck with the only person in the office who practices the black arts of Excel formulae and macros. It will only end badly. I was a diver in high school on the swim team. The way scoring works, as long as a diver places first third, they get more points in one meet than a swimmer can earn in multiple events placing first per meet. As a freshman, I walk into the locker room mid-meet to see one of the senior swimmers choking a freshman with a wire hanger. I was small, so I said nothing to either of them but ran to get the coach. The senior swimmer was not allowed to compete after that. I got called diver fag for 3 fucking years for being a tattletale, including by the kid that was getting choked. So I quit the team my senior year. It was the only year my team didn't make states. Guess y'all didn't need diver fags points, huh? Side note, I wasn't that good at diver, but I usually placed 4 points. Fuck high school. As a kid who was beaten for years by mother and stepfather, and dad knew this but wouldn't help me in the slightest way and treated me horribly, I can honestly say that as the kid who would take care of an ailing parent, I will now, as an adult, tell that now ailing parent that they are on their own to fend for himself. Me 100x over. My dad recently made a crack against my younger sister when she volunteered to care for him in old age. He mocked her and tore her down, then basically said I was the only one cut out for it, and my response was that sucks because you're not moving in with me and I'm not paying for anything. Better go back to little sister and ask her to reconsider. He did and she didn't. He has now been preemptively abandoned by all 3 of his daughters. Here's hoping my brothers got him, cause I sure as fuck don't. My turn. I'm the only guy in my immediate and extended family, outside of the dads who weren't around. Literally every male task was thrown at me at a young age. Take out the trash. Watch the kids. Fix the lawnmower. I kid you not. This was all before I hit puberty. And whenever I reached a stressful time, it was always man up followed by a shitty chuckle. By the time I made it to middle school and started to force my independence from my family, I was labeled ungrateful, selfish, you name it. And I swore the moment I could leave I would. And never look back. One day I get into it with my mom and she puts me out. At 15. I had to figure out how to get to school and provide for myself, all while not giving up and going back. Within 5 years my family deteriorated to just people who share DNA. I'm 31 now and I'm no contact with most of my family, excluding my sister. She always understood how I felt. And TBH, it feels good knowing that it fell apart without me, because being a man to my family is being an absorber of everyone's problems. How did you survive at 15? Did you move in with a friend or were you homeless or something? I can't imagine someone renting to a 15-year-old. Glad you're doing okay now. This happened to me, my dad, my brother, and my sister technically. But a massive ice storm happened in Oklahoma City when I was about 7. I think it was 2008 when it happened. An ice storm, for anyone who hasn't had the luxury of experiencing one, is when it rains during a cold day, and overnight it freezes everything that got rained on. So everything was covered in an inch or more of ice. So a gigantic tree in our backyard was weighed down so much by the tree that it fell straight through our house and destroyed it while we were inside. Miraculously no one was hurt, but we were instantly homeless because of it. So my dad asked our aunt, his sister, who lived in North Carolina, if we could stay in one of her dozen rental properties, because she had 5 available. And she actually charged us more than the cost of the usual rent to stay there, despite what we had just gone through and my dad trying to find a job. Well, cut to 2011. My dad finally had a good paying job and was doing great. Well, there was a tornado that hit our town in 2011 and ripped the roof off my aunt's house and essentially destroyed it. Well, my dad happened to have 2 rental properties and charged her about 3 times the amount of the rent that he'd usually charge just to stay in the house. So not me personally, but I got to see it firsthand. My relationship with my parents is at the best strained. I'm the oldest child of divorced parents and my dad at some point around 9 years old stopped spending time with me. He ended up having 2 more kids for a different woman, both boys, and focused all his time on them and only paid for my schooling. Funnily enough, at this same age I was starting to get sexually abused by my mom's abuser, her uncle. She knowingly left me alone with her abuser on multiple occasions, even over weekends. She also ended up having 2 other kids and I kept them from being abused by allowing him to assault me so he wouldn't see them. I was thankfully raised for the rest of my childhood and even adulthood now by my grandparents, who are literal angels. I have told both of my parents that I won't be taking care of them as they get up in age and I won't be helping raise their kids. The only comfort is that although I burnt down the village, I'm now warm. Rough stuff, mate. Hope you are doing well. Did the uncle ever face any legal consequences? I'd say the majority of bullied kids who turn to crime have that story. The bullying doesn't always happen at school or outside the home, either. Growing up, I knew a kid who was bullied relentlessly by his older brother, mostly little things like eating all the pizza that they were meant to share, but eventually it escalated to bigger things like humiliating him in front of all the parents and students during the school Christmas pageant. The worst part was that the grown-ups in their family didn't do anything about it and even took the older brother's side on multiple occasions. All of these things clearly had a lasting effect on the poor kid's development, and he ended up doing some pretty sadistic stuff to two burglars who tried to break into the house one Christmas while the rest of the family was away on vacation. My friend at work had a rough childhood. Nevertheless, he was always cool to me. He'd cover my shifts and sit with me at dinner break. Anyway, he stabbed his grandpa to death and burned down his house. It was so sudden. Did you ever hear any reasoning? One of my colleagues used to tell about a simple man, quiet but intelligent and hardworking. He was an honest government employee earlier, but had a desire to make system level changes. He hence had his heart set on joining the district police force to make an impact. He tried quite a few number of times to get in, honestly, with sincere efforts. However, due to corruption and the fact that he came from a family with low means, he was unsuccessful. His frustration kept growing each time he heard a no. He finally gave up and started doing minor crimes. Within a few years, he was amongst the top wanted criminals of multiple neighboring districts. He had multiple, serious charges against him. The police was unable to catch him, as he always was literally one step ahead of them. I think he was caught after many years, but till the time he was outside, he wreaked havoc on the system. He could have changed for good with his wits. My family. My mom was neglectful because she was a single parent who had to work. And my brother was a monster, and he got away with torturing me for the first 15 years of my life because of the neglect. I really looked up to both of them for most of my life, not because they deserved it, but I had a kind of Stockholm syndrome thing going. Now I have a hard time imagining a bigger piece of shit than my brother, and I have to hold back tears anytime I see a parent giving their child some attention, because the childhood neglect fucked me up real good. I can't be in the same room with those shats anymore. So I have figuratively burned down my family. And the sad thing is, I know it hurts them to have lost me, because I have always been so attentive, positive and supportive to them for most of my life, and imagining them to be in pain over it makes me happy because of all of the power. I am not happy that their pain brings me pleasure. It does bring me a sick, twisted pleasure, but I refuse to indulge in it, or wallow in it. I still intend to be a good person in spite of my family.